Hey guys, Mr. Steckler here. Quick instructions for today for your sub-assignment. So I have a couple of reminders here. You're going to want to use the desktop version of PowerPoint. You're not going to want to use the iPad version because of formatting issues. Please ask your neighbors if you need help, and you can send me a Schoology message if you have a question. I'm at my computer all day, so I can respond. So a couple other things. When you guys are working today in your lesson over here, your goal is to get from step 1 all the way up to step number 14 today. So our goal is to try and finish the first 2 slides. Step number 15 will be the third one on alignment, and we're going to try and get to that the day after on Friday when we get back. So your goal is to get up to step 14. A couple other pieces of information is when you guys are coming back in, we skipped to step 8 last time, so you may have to go back up and finish some other questions before, so make sure you follow your check marks. Work your way down, read the instructions again on contrast if you need it. Please also be aware this background color slide is a good suggestion, but it is not your perfect solution. Just make sure that when you're using your color schemes, you stick to rule number 1 and stick to rule number 2. And when you get to this step number 8, you can watch this video for some extra supports. But before you go to this video, I want to just give you a couple of quick hints and tips for when you are making your PowerPoints. So over here, this is my presentation on the effective presentation on what goes into a good PowerPoint with crap. And I want you guys to kind of take note of the different colors and the different ways in which I'm using some of the different elements, such as contrast with the colors that we talked about last class as a quick refresher. Yellow is the highest saturated color, which goes really well against dark backgrounds, especially dark blue. You don't have to pick that color, just reference the chart and use the 2 rules. So for contrast over here, you're going to notice that when I was going through a couple of slides, I started with white and I had yellow over here, and I ended up switching from a white word for contrast over here, which is what I tried to get you guys to focus on, to having this yellow over here. But you'll notice something that we haven't done yet, but I just want to make clear, and that is the most important part of making a PowerPoint, is actually using a bold enough font, which is actually part of the proximity. But if you take a look at this slide over here, I want you guys to specifically focus on choosing a bold font before you get too deep into your PowerPoint, or you're going to spend too much time on the formatting issue. So a couple of different fonts I like a lot are Rockwell, and I also really like Rockwell Extra Bold. But if you go through, there's a ton of really bold fonts that you can play with. So when you're going through these, make sure you choose really bold fonts. Even for the writing over here, you don't want it to stand out more than your main word, but you don't want just a very thin font, such as maybe Arial over here. Like the letters just aren't as good, and I believe it's going to make a big difference if you choose a nice and bold font. So that's a couple pieces of information on the slide. You'll also notice that from slide to slide to slide, from contrast to repetition, one key part about repetition over here is that you want to keep the same color scheme on every background. You're noticing that the slide on contrast has a blue background. My slide on repetition over here does not have a different color background, such as if I were to do now like an orange backgrounds. It wouldn't have the aspect of repetition if every slide was a different color. So whatever color scheme you pick for your background, you're going to stick to it. And I also want you guys to try your best to avoid using the themes until the last day. I want you guys to focus on being the designer and choosing all of the colors and the contrast, so that you guys are going to be able to be completely in charge of the proximity over here, and the repetition and the contrast and all the different elements. So your focus on today is on contrast and repetition. And the last hint that I have for you guys is, in order to get the slides formatted in a way where you can go from one slide to the next, where the words are in very similar spots, is actually by right-clicking on your slide and then clicking duplicate slide. And then from your duplicate slide, you can go ahead and work on changing the word from, in this case, contrast to repetition. And then you can delete some of these words over here to then start typing your new words over here. That way, when you go from slide to slide, they're in the exact same spot. So that's one of the hints that's really important, to use the duplicate slide, because otherwise, if we were to just create a completely new slide, it's going to be very, very hard for you guys to get the font in the exact same spots as the other slide was, to make that aspect of repetition really pop out. So it has a lot to do with the color, and it also has a lot to do with the font and keeping it nice and clean and professional by having the different colors repeated. So work on the 2 slides, follow the instructions. Your goal is to get, as I mentioned before, down to step number 14. If you don't get there, that's okay. We have a lot of time working on it, but that's your goal. You should be around step 14 by the end of the period, and you may need to spend a little time outside of school if you don't get here. So have fun today. Send me an email if you have any questions, and I will catch you guys in a couple days.